It was supposed to be just another Saturday. The sun was out, the air was warm, and everywhere you looked, people were either chatting over coffee or scouring yard sales in search of hidden treasures. But for Sarah, this was a day she'd never forget. Picture this. You're casually flipping through an old box of photos at a yard sale, the kind you always pass by without giving a second glance. But then you stop, and in the fading light of a dusty old album, something catches your eye. A photo, worn and yellowing, but oddly familiar. The faces, the background, something about it feels like it's calling out to you. You pause, and as your fingers trace the edges of the photo, a chill runs down your spine. There, staring back at you, is someone you never thought you'd see again. Someone who shouldn't be there. And that person is someone from your own family. But wait, here's the twist. This isn't a memory you recall. This isn't an old photo of a distant relative you never met. No, this person, this face, was never part of your family history. At least, not in the way you thought. This mysterious stranger was standing next to your mother, a woman you'd known your whole life. Your heart races as you try to piece together the impossible. Why on earth is this stranger in a photo that belongs to you? What Sarah found that day would lead her down a path filled with secrets, lies, and a hidden family history she had no idea existed. Trust me, by the time you finish watching this, you're going to wish you had never seen this photo yourself. Because once you've opened that door, there's no closing it. This is the kind of story that makes you question everything you thought you knew. Imagine being Sarah, holding a photo that's too personal, too familiar, and yet so unbelievably wrong. You can feel her confusion, her curiosity, her fear. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. If you're anything like me, you'll be thinking, what's next? Who is this person? What did Sarah uncover? I promise, we're just getting started. Keep watching, because I'm going to reveal the twists and turns that will leave you shocked and questioning how well you really know the people in your own life. You're going to hear how Sarah took the photo home, couldn't let it go, and started investigating. This decision led her to unearth details about her family's past, details that no one, not even her own mother, had ever mentioned before. And guess what? It gets stranger. Much stranger. Stay with me, because I'm not going to let you go until you've heard the truth. The truth behind that photo, the mystery of the unfamiliar face, and the shocking revelation that followed will leave you speechless. But here's the catch. You're going to have to stick with me to the very end. There's no turning back once we go down this rabbit hole. So, are you ready to find out who the person in that photo really is? Who are they, and why were they in Sarah's family album, as if they were part of her life all along? You won't believe what Sarah discovered when she finally got the answers. It's a story that will stick with you, and by the end of this video, you'll be questioning everything about your own family photos. If you think you know where this is going, think again. You're in for a ride that will challenge what you believe is possible. But for now, let me leave you with this question. Who is this person? And why is their face haunting Sarah's family history? What dark secret is buried in this simple yard sale photo? Keep watching, because the truth is coming, and you won't want to miss it. Sarah had always been the kind of person who enjoyed the simple pleasures in life. She lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, surrounded by the kind of peace that only comes with time and familiarity. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and the days felt like they stretched on forever. But even in such a calm environment, Sarah had always felt a little out of place, a little disconnected. Maybe it was the way she grew up, the constant feeling that she wasn't really part of the world around her. Maybe it was the unanswered questions about her past, about her family, that kept her from ever truly feeling grounded. Her parents were loving but distant, and despite being surrounded by a network of people, there was always a sense of something missing, like a puzzle piece that was always just out of reach. Over the years, Sarah had been piecing together the fragmented memories of her childhood, trying to make sense of the strange gaps in her family's story. She'd heard bits and pieces from her mother, old family friends, and distant relatives, but there was never a full picture. It was almost as if there were things that no one wanted to talk about. Her mother, in particular, seemed to shy away from anything that could prompt a conversation about the past. It was as though there was a collective agreement that some things were better left unsaid. But, like any good mystery, the more she tried to push for answers, the more those unanswered questions gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper lurking beneath the surface, something about her family's past that no one was willing to acknowledge. Sarah's discovery at the yard sale wasn't her first brush with unsettling mysteries. In the past year, she'd found herself drawn to odd, unexplained events in her life. She had started doing a bit of amateur sleuthing, dabbling in old newspapers and public records, trying to uncover secrets that had been buried for decades. She'd even started to question the origins of the old, worn-out furniture her mother kept in the attic, the stuff that looked like it belonged in a museum more than a home. It wasn't until the strange, haunting photo appeared that Sarah felt a deep sense of urgency. She wasn't just curious anymore, she was driven. The mystery now consumed her thoughts. How could a photo of someone who was clearly a stranger be part of her family's history? And why was her mother so adamant about not talking about it? After she found the photo, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The woman's face in the picture seemed so familiar, yet entirely out of place. It was as though she had always been on the edge of Sarah's consciousness, someone who had been hovering just beneath the surface, waiting to be remembered. But who was she? The woman was smiling in the photo, standing next to Sarah's mother, as though they shared some kind of intimate connection. But Sarah had never seen her before. She wasn't a distant relative, nor was she someone Sarah had heard about in the family stories. The woman in the picture didn't belong, and that feeling gnawed at her the more she stared at it. As she began to dig deeper into her family's history, Sarah found herself retracing old conversations with her mother, trying to find any hint, any slip-up that could provide some clue to unravel the mystery. But every conversation seemed to bring up more questions than answers. Her mother, a woman who had always been so composed and calm, seemed strangely evasive whenever Sarah brought up the photo. At first, it seemed like a natural reaction. Who wouldn't be thrown off by something so unexpected? But as the days went by, Sarah couldn't shake the nagging feeling that her mother knew more than she was letting on. There was something in the way her mother's eyes darted around when Sarah asked about the picture, something in the way she avoided direct answers. It was as if her mother was protecting a secret, but why? And what was it? The more Sarah dug, the more she realized that there were other strange things happening in her life that she had brushed aside. She began receiving cryptic phone calls from a blocked number, the kind of calls that made her skin crawl. The voice on the other end was always distorted, as though someone was trying to hide their identity. Each time the person spoke, it was a warning to stop asking questions, to leave things alone. At first, she thought it was just some kind of prank, but the calls kept coming. They were too specific to be random. They were clearly about the photo, about her family. The last call she received made her blood run cold. "Some things are better left forgotten, Sarah," the voice had said before hanging up. Her friends and neighbors noticed the change in Sarah, too. They couldn't quite put their finger on it, but there was something off about her. She had always been the quiet, introspective type, but now she seemed on edge, restless. Her late-night research sessions had become a regular part of her routine, and she spent hours scrolling through old records and archives, hoping for a clue. It wasn't just the mystery of the photo anymore. It was the sensation that someone or something was watching her, waiting for her to uncover the truth. And just as things started to feel like they were closing in, a new name surfaced. A name Sarah had never heard before: Alice Morrow. It was an odd name, and it didn't seem to belong in the context of Sarah's family history. But the more she dug into Alice Morrow, the more she realized that the name kept popping up in places where it shouldn't have been. Old letters, faded newspaper clippings, and even mentions in records from people who had known her mother in her younger years, all pointing to Alice Morrow. But who was she? And why was her name associated with Sarah's mother? Had her mother known her? And if so, why had she never mentioned her? It was then that Sarah discovered something truly chilling. One of the old letters she uncovered was dated from the year her mother had been pregnant with Sarah. The letter, written in an elegant, flowing hand, was signed with the name Alice Morrow. And it contained a cryptic message that made Sarah's heart stop. "If you ever need to find me, I will be waiting where the shadows linger, where the past cannot be outrun. Who was Alice Morrow, and why was she so significant to Sarah's family? Why did her mother hide this person's existence from her? Was this photo more than just a glimpse into the past? Was it a warning? A message? And if so, what was it trying to tell Sarah? The deeper she got into her search, the more questions she uncovered. And the more Sarah dug, the more she realized that some mysteries were never meant to be solved. The truth, she feared, might be too much to bear. But there was no going back now. She had to know. She had to unravel the mystery, no matter where it led. And as she stared at the photo once more, she knew she was on the verge of uncovering something far darker than she ever imagined. But who could she trust? And what if the answer was a truth too terrible to face? The more Sarah delved into her investigation, the more obstacles seemed to pop up, as if someone or something was determined to keep the truth hidden. It started with something small, almost imperceptible. A piece of evidence went missing. It was an old photograph, one she had found in a hidden compartment of a family heirloom her mother had kept locked away for years. The photograph was a grainy black and white shot of her mother and a group of people, but one of them was a face she'd never seen before, the same mysterious woman from the photo she had found at the yard sale. Sarah had carefully placed the picture on her desk, setting it beside her laptop as she researched more about Alice Morrow. But when she returned the next day, the photo was gone. She searched her room, her house, even checked the trash. It was as if it had vanished into thin air. At first, Sarah thought she might have misplaced it, but after hours of frantic searching, she realized that wasn't the case. It was gone, and she had no explanation. It was just the beginning. The very next day, she received another phone call from the blocked number. This time, the voice was colder, sharper, almost threatening. "You're getting too close, Sarah. Stop now before it's too late." The words hung in the air, heavy with menace. Sarah's pulse quickened. Who was this person? Was it someone trying to protect her, or were they trying to bury the truth? She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her every move, waiting for her to slip up. She tried to block the number, but the calls continued to come, each one more insistent than the last. And each one seemed to pull her further down a path she wasn't sure she was ready to walk. But it wasn't just the mysterious calls that made her feel paranoid. Sarah's own mother was becoming increasingly agitated whenever Sarah brought up Alice Morrow. Her mother, once a calm and steady presence, seemed to be unraveling before her eyes. The cracks in her composed exterior were starting to show. The evasiveness in her responses had gone from subtle to outright defensive. "You need to stop asking about this," her mother had warned one evening, her voice trembling with an edge of desperation Sarah had never heard before. "Some things are better left in the past." The pleading tone in her voice sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. Why was her mother so afraid of something so simple? What was she hiding? Sarah's instincts told her to push harder, to dig deeper, but the fear of what she might uncover began to weigh heavily on her. She had always trusted her mother. She had always been the one person Sarah believed would never deceive her. But now, doubts were creeping into her mind. The more Sarah uncovered about Alice Morrow, the more she realized how little she actually knew about her mother's past. It was as if her mother had lived a completely different life before Sarah was born, one that Sarah had never been privy to.
But why?
Was her mother hiding something darker than she could ever imagine? The thought kept Sarah up at night, her mind racing with possibilities. And then came the moment that really shook her to the core. A few days after her mother's warning, Sarah received a message from an unexpected source. It was from a woman named Lily, a name Sarah didn't recognize. The message was short, almost cryptic, but it was clear. "Stop looking into Alice Morrow. You're treading on dangerous ground. There are people who won't let you find what you're after. Trust me, some truths are too dangerous to uncover." The message was accompanied by a photo, one Sarah had never seen before. It was a snapshot of her mother, taken in a dimly lit room, standing next to a man who was completely unfamiliar to Sarah. But the man's expression was haunting. He looked like he was hiding something he was desperate to keep secret. There was something about the look in his eyes that made Sarah feel uneasy, like she had seen him before. Sarah's heart raced as she tried to make sense of the message. Who was Lily, and why was she suddenly warning her? Had she known about Alice Morrow all along? Or was Lily someone with her own hidden agenda? Sarah tried to reply to the message, but it bounced back as if it had never been sent. She felt like she was in the middle of a twisted game where the rules kept changing and every clue she uncovered only led her deeper into a web of lies. Determined to get answers, Sarah decided to confront her mother directly. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she had to know the truth. She sat her mother down that evening, the photo of Alice Morrow lying between them on the kitchen table. The air was thick with tension, the silence stretching between them like a chasm. "Mom," Sarah began, her voice trembling with both fear and resolve, "I need you to tell me everything. Who is Alice Morrow? Why is her name showing up in all these old documents and photos? What is it that you've been hiding from me?" Her mother's face paled at the mention of Alice's name, and for a brief moment, Sarah thought she saw something flicker in her eyes, something close to panic. "Sarah, please, I told you to stop." "You don't know what you're asking," her mother whispered, her voice barely audible. "There are things you're not ready to understand." But Sarah wasn't ready to back down. She pressed harder, her frustration boiling over. "I need to know, Mom. I have to know the truth." That's when her mother's expression shifted. It was as if she had made a decision that would change everything. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. It was old, the edges frayed, as though it had been hidden away for years. This is everything you need to know," her mother said, her voice tight with emotion. "But be warned, once you read this, there's no turning back." Sarah's hands shook as she opened the envelope, revealing a set of papers inside. Old, yellow documents. As she read through them, a shocking revelation hit her like a punch to the gut. The documents were birth certificates, legal papers, and a letter written in a hurried, disjointed hand. But one name kept appearing, Alice Morrow. And as Sarah read the final document, the words felt like they were burning into her brain. "Your mother isn't who you think she is." The truth, it seemed, was more complicated and more dangerous than Sarah had ever imagined. But just as she was about to ask her mother what this all meant, there was a loud bang at the door. Someone was knocking, and not just any knock. This one was urgent, frantic. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Who could it be? Had someone found her? Was her search finally catching up to her? As Sarah opened the door, she froze. Standing in front of her was a man she had never seen before, holding a briefcase. He looked almost relieved to see her, but his expression was also filled with something else, something Sarah couldn't quite place. "I need to speak with you," he said, his voice low and calm. "It's about your mother. And Alice Morrow. We need to talk." What did this stranger know? And how was he connected to everything Sarah had uncovered so far? The twists were only getting deeper, and Sarah realized she was in way over her head. But she couldn't stop now. She had to keep going. The truth was within reach. But at what cost? The man at the door stepped inside, his gaze scanning the room as though he was checking for hidden threats. His presence was overwhelming, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As he lowered his briefcase onto the coffee table, the room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with tension. "You don't understand," the man said, his voice steady but urgent. "This isn't just about your mother. It's about something much bigger. And if we don't move quickly, we'll all be in danger." Sarah's mind raced. What could be bigger than everything she'd already uncovered? She glanced at her mother, whose face had gone pale at the man's words, as if she had known this was coming. But before she could process anything further, another knock echoed through the room, sharp and insistent. Sarah froze. Who else could be coming now? As she walked to the door, her pulse raced. She wasn't sure she wanted to know what was on the other side. When she opened it, the last person she expected to see was standing there, her older brother, Jack. His usually confident demeanor was gone, replaced with a look of sheer panic. "Sarah, we need to talk. I've been getting strange calls, the same ones you've been getting. And someone's been following me." His words spilled out in a rush, barely coherent. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Jack was normally the practical one, the person who kept a level head in the face of chaos. But right now, he looked like a man who had seen something he couldn't explain. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room suspiciously, as if the walls themselves were closing in on him. This was too much. Sarah had been digging into the mystery for days, but now it felt as if the whole world was collapsing around her. Her brother, too? What did this mean? Had someone targeted her entire family? The strange phone calls, the missing photos, the cryptic messages. It was becoming impossible to ignore the growing sense that there were forces at play here that went beyond anything she had ever imagined. Jack pulled out his phone, showing Sarah a message he had received earlier that day. It was from the same block number, but this time the message was even more chilling. "You're getting too close.
Stay out of this.
Or else." Sarah's mind whirled. Whoever had been sending those messages clearly wanted to silence them. Her, Jack, and anyone else who dared to dig into the past. But who were they? And why did they think they could stop Sarah from learning the truth? She glanced at the man in the room with them, who was still watching the exchange with cold, calculating eyes. "This isn't a coincidence," he said finally, breaking the silence. "You need to stop investigating Alice Morrow, and you need to stop now. If you don't, things will escalate quickly. And not just for you, your entire family could be at risk." The warning sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. What did this man know that they didn't? Who was he, and what was his connection to everything that had happened? As if on cue, Jack suddenly let out a sharp gasp, his eyes wide as he stared at his phone. "Sarah, there's something else," he said, his voice trembling. "You won't believe this, but I found something. I don't know how it's possible, but I found a new photo, one that shouldn't exist." The photo Jack showed her was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. It was a candid shot taken at a family gathering many years ago. In the background of the photo, just behind their mother, stood Alice Morrow. But this wasn't the same woman from the yard sale photo. This version of Alice looked younger, more vibrant, and yet there was something disturbing about the image. In fact, the more Sarah looked at it, the more she realized there was another figure standing right beside Alice, someone she had never seen before but whose face was unmistakable. It was the same man from the photo her mother had hidden away, the one she had only just discovered in her investigation. The man who looked like he was trying to hide something. The connections were starting to form in ways Sarah couldn't even process. The deeper she dug, the more convoluted everything became. This wasn't just about Alice Morrow. This was about something far more complex and far more dangerous than she could have ever anticipated. But just as the pieces were beginning to fall into place, the room went dark. The power in the house cut out abruptly, and Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She could hear Jack's breath, shallow and quick, and her mother was already standing by the window, looking out at the street nervously. The silence stretched, suffocating, before the man with the briefcase moved toward the door. "Stay here," he said, his voice low. "I'll find out who's doing this. You're not safe anymore." But before Sarah could ask what he meant, he was gone, disappearing into the dark. The tension was unbearable, and Sarah was left standing in the middle of the room, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of events unfolding before her. Her brother's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear, and she could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on her chest. Whatever was happening, whatever she was getting herself into, it was bigger than she could have ever imagined. And now, it seemed that the very people she trusted the most, her mother, her brother, might be hiding secrets that could destroy them all. The uncertainty was suffocating. Was this man a friend, or was he just another part of the conspiracy to keep the truth buried? Could she trust Jack, who now seemed as lost and terrified as she was? And what about her mother, who had been so adamant about keeping everything in the past? Sarah's mind spun with more questions than answers. The stakes had never been higher, and the walls were closing in faster than she could keep up. The path she was on was leading her to a place she wasn't sure she could return from. Every move she made seemed to pull her deeper into the mystery, and the more she uncovered, the more dangerous it became. The twists and turns were endless, And just when she thought she was one step closer to the truth, another layer of deception was revealed. As Sarah stood there, lost in thought, the lights flickered back on, casting an eerie glow across the room. In that moment, she knew she had reached the point of no return. Whatever lay ahead, she had to keep going. But the danger was real, and the consequences of uncovering the truth might be more than she could bear. The unknown was waiting, and Sarah had no idea just how far this rabbit hole would go. As the days passed, Sarah couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something was wrong. The man in the briefcase had warned her, but his words echoed in her mind like a ghost, impossible to ignore. The deeper she ventured into the past, the more it seemed like the walls around her were closing in. She'd gone through her mother's old letters, found more photos, and started to piece together bits of a history she never knew existed, but every step forward felt like it pushed her further into a web of darkness. She didn't know who to trust anymore. It started with small things, the kind of occurrences you dismiss if you weren't paying close attention. One evening, Sarah arrived home to find her front door slightly ajar. She hesitated, her hand frozen on the handle as a sick feeling crawled up her spine. She pushed the door open, her eyes scanning the room, but everything seemed in place. The house felt unnervingly quiet, but she chalked it up to her nerves, the tension of everything she'd been uncovering. But as she walked deeper into the house, she noticed something strange. Her laptop, which had been tucked away on her desk just hours earlier, was now sitting on the kitchen counter. Had she left it there? She couldn't remember. The unease grew, but it wasn't until later that night, when she checked her phone, that the true terror set in. A message popped up on her screen from an unknown number. "You're getting too close. This isn't a game. Stop now, or you'll be the next to disappear." The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Sarah's heart began to pound in her chest as she stared at the message, trying to process what it meant. Her fingers trembled as she typed a reply, but before she could send it, the phone rang. The caller ID was blocked, but she felt an overwhelming urge to answer. "Hello," she said, her voice tight. There was a long pause on the other end, and then a voice, low and distorted, crackled through the line. "You think you're in control of this, don't you?" The voice rasped, sending a chill through Sarah. "But you have no idea what you're dealing with. It's too late to turn back now." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Her mind raced. Who was this? Who knew what she was uncovering, and why were they so determined to stop her? Was this connected to the strange figure in the old family photo? Had Alice Moreau been a pawn in something bigger than she could have ever imagined? The questions piled on top of each other, drowning her in a sea of uncertainty. She couldn't sit still anymore. Every noise, every creak of the floorboards, every shadow seemed to have a meaning now, a hidden message meant to send her into panic. She told herself she was being paranoid, but deep down, she knew something far worse was lurking. And then, the worst thing imaginable happened. It was a Saturday night when Jack disappeared. He'd been staying with her for a while, ever since he had received his own cryptic messages, and they had spent the last few days together, trying to make sense of everything. But when Sarah returned home from running errands, Jack was gone. His things were still in the apartment, his jacket thrown over the chair, his shoes left near the door, but he was nowhere to be found.
Panic set in.
Sarah's heart raced as she dialed his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. The sense of dread tightened in her chest, and she sprinted through every room of the apartment, checking closets, even the bathroom. There was no sign of him, and yet it was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. Her first instinct was to call the police, but then she remembered the warning the mysterious man had given her. "Stay out of this. Or else." Could this have been the "or else" he was talking about? Had her own brother been taken because of her investigation? Her pulse quickened, and a wave of nausea swept over her. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in on her as the weight of the situation settled. This wasn't just a family mystery, it was something far more dangerous, and now it was personal. She sat on the couch, her mind racing, her thoughts scattered. The minutes felt like hours, and the longer she waited for any sign of Jack, the more the anxiety gnawed at her. Was he in danger? Had someone taken him to punish her for digging too deep into the past? And then, just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jack. The message was brief, cryptic, and chilling. "They found me. I'm sorry, Sarah. It's too late for me." Sarah felt her stomach drop, the words blurring before her eyes. What did he mean by that? Was he in danger? She tried calling him again, but this time the phone rang once and then went silent, as if someone had disconnected the call. Panic surged through her, and she stood up, pacing the room. The feeling that she was being watched, followed, it wasn't just paranoia anymore. It was real. She could feel it, closing in on her, the noose tightening around her every time she stepped out into the world. Someone didn't just want her to stop looking, they wanted her to disappear, just like her brother. Her thoughts raced to the man with the briefcase. What did he know? Could he have been the one to warn Jack to back off? But there were so many gaps in the story. The man's motives weren't clear, and she couldn't decide if he was an ally or just another part of the puzzle she was trying to solve. Was he helping them, or had he been manipulating them all along? A knock on the door shattered the silence, and Sarah froze. She couldn't afford to trust anyone anymore. Not after what happened to Jack, not after the threatening messages. She stood still, her breath caught in her throat, listening. The knock came again, louder this time. It was almost as if whoever was on the other side knew she was in there, knew she was listening. Her heart raced as she peered through the peephole, but the only thing she saw was a shadow. It was too dark to make out any details. And then, as if to confirm her deepest fear, a voice floated through the crack in the door, soft but unmistakable. "Sarah, it's me, Jack. Let me in. They're coming." In that instant, every muscle in Sarah's body tensed, her mind screaming at her to open the door, to save her brother. But something in her gut told her it was a trap. It wasn't Jack. It couldn't be. She took a step back, her hands trembling as she reached for the phone again, only to find it buzzing with another message. "You're next. Stop looking, or you won't be able to save him." Just as Sarah stood frozen, staring at the door, trying to make sense of the terrifying voice calling from the other side, a sudden realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. She stepped back from the door and dropped her phone onto the kitchen counter, her mind racing through the puzzle she had been piecing together over the past few weeks. The eerie messages, Jack's disappearance, the warnings, the strange figure in the family photo, nothing had made sense. But now, something she had completely overlooked was staring her in the face. The one person she had trusted above all others had just played her. Jack wasn't the innocent victim in this. Not at all. Her mind flashed back to the moment when Jack had first shown up at her apartment, claiming to be in danger, having received similar threats. He was frantic, desperate even, but she had assumed it was because he had been caught up in the same web she was entangled in. But what if that wasn't the truth? What if Jack wasn't just a pawn in this twisted game? What if he was the one pulling the strings all along? What if he had been playing her? The thought sent a cold wave through Sarah as she felt the weight of betrayal sink deep into her chest. She picked up her phone again, the message from Jack still flashing on the screen. "You're next. Stop looking, or you won't be able to save him." It made sense now, but not in the way she had imagined. In her haste to uncover the truth about her mother's mysterious past, she hadn't taken a closer look at the one person who had always been there for her, the one person who had encouraged her to dig deeper into the secrets of the family history. Jack had always known more than he let on, but she had dismissed it, thinking he was just trying to help. And now, it seemed as if the person she had believed was her ally might have been her greatest adversary all along. Then, as if confirming her deepest suspicions, another message came through. It wasn't from Jack, but from an unknown number. "You still haven't figured it out, have you?" Sarah's heart pounded as she scrolled down, her mind trying to process the unexpected shift. The message continued. "It's Jack's fault you're in this mess. He's been hiding things from you, things you wouldn't believe. He's the one who set everything in motion. You think he's your brother, but you've been blind. He's been working with the people who want to silence you from the start." The floor beneath Sarah seemed to tilt, and she gripped the counter to steady herself. Her vision blurred as the enormity of what she was reading started to sink in. Her brother, her own flesh and blood, had been using her as a pawn in a game far bigger than she had ever imagined. But why? What did he have to gain by keeping her in the dark? And who were the people he was working with? Was this connected to the strange figure in the photo? Was he somehow involved in the disappearance of Alice Morrow? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door once again, and this time, there was no mistaking it. Jack's voice was unmistakable. "Sarah," he called from outside, "please open the door. It's not what you think. I can explain. You have to trust me." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Was this another trap? Another lie? Her instinct screamed for her to stay away, but her heart ached with the desperate need to believe him. She had always trusted Jack. He was her brother. But what if everything she had believed was a carefully constructed illusion? With trembling hands, she opened the door just enough to peer out, half expecting to see Jack standing there, pleading with her. But instead, it was a woman she didn't recognize, standing in the shadows. She looked disheveled, her face pale and worn, as though she hadn't slept in days. The woman stepped closer, her eyes frantic, her voice shaking. "I need to talk to you. You don't know who I am, but I know who you are." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Who was this woman? Was she part of the story? And what did she know about her mother? But before Sarah could say anything, the woman continued, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm not supposed to be here, but I have to warn you. Everything you've been told is a lie. Jack. He's not your brother. He's the one who's been pulling the strings this whole time. He's the one who's been lying to you. He's not who you think he is." The words hit Sarah like a ton of bricks, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. Everything in her mind shattered. What was happening? Had her entire life, her family, her very identity been a lie? Was the brother she had grown up with, shared memories with, really someone else entirely? Her thoughts spun in circles, a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. The woman reached out, her hands trembling as she grabbed Sarah by the arm, pulling her away from the door. "Please, you have to listen to me," she said, her voice growing more urgent. "He's been part of something much bigger than you realize. You're not just uncovering your mother's past, you're uncovering something that threatens everything you know. Jack knows more than he's letting on, and if you don't stop him, you'll be next. You have to get away from him before it's too late." Sarah felt the room spin as the woman's words sank in. Was this all connected? Had Jack known everything all along? She stood frozen, unable to move or speak, her mind a blur of confusion, fear, and betrayal. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but they didn't make sense. And just as she felt the first stirrings of clarity, another message buzzed on her phone, this time from Jack. "You've made a mistake. It's too late. I'm coming for you." The fear that had been building inside Sarah was no longer just a feeling. It was a reality. She was deep into something she couldn't escape from, and now, everyone she trusted seemed to be working against her. What had started as a search for family history had turned into a deadly game, and the stakes had never been higher. The room felt suffocating. Every breath Sarah took seemed to grow heavier, as though the air around her had thickened with the weight of the decisions she had to make. She couldn't even bring herself to look at the woman who had warned her. Every word the woman had said echoed in her ears, reverberating through her skull like a constant reminder of the impossible choices now placed in front of her. Jack wasn't her brother. That revelation felt like the floor had been pulled from beneath her. What did it mean? Had every moment they'd shared been a lie? Every memory, every fight, every laugh, was it all some twisted manipulation? The woman, whose face was still clouded with fear, was now pressing her for answers, but Sarah didn't have any. She had no answers, just a growing pit in her stomach as the realization of betrayal took root in her heart. And yet, despite the swirling uncertainty, she knew one thing for sure. Jack was in danger. And so was she. The woman didn't give Sarah much time to digest what she had just learned. "You need to make a choice now," she said, her voice hushed with urgency. "Jack's involved in something much darker than you can imagine. He's not just been lying to you, he's been controlling you. And he's going to make sure you don't get to the truth. He'll stop at nothing to keep you from finding out who he really is. Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady herself. Could she trust this woman? Could she even trust herself anymore? Every move she made now seemed to bring her closer to a cliff, and she had no idea how far down the fall would be. Then, as if fate had decided to throw one last wrench into the mix, her phone buzzed again. The screen lit up with a text from Jack. "You know too much. I'm giving you one last chance to back off. If you don't, things will get ugly, and I can't protect you anymore." The words were chilling, but it wasn't the threat that caught Sarah's attention. It was the fact that the message came through as if it were the last line of defense in a twisted game. Jack was forcing her hand, pushing her into a corner with no way out. Her thoughts were jumbled. She wanted to believe Jack. She wanted to believe that he was still the brother she had grown up with. But now, every interaction, every look he had given her, every time he said he was looking out for her, it felt tainted. Was he really the one who had been protecting her? Or was he the very thing she should have feared all along? The woman, sensing Sarah's indecision, stepped closer. "I'm telling you this because you need to understand what's at stake. If you don't confront him now, if you don't ask the hard questions, you may never get the chance to do so again. Jack isn't just hiding something from you, he's hiding something from everyone. There's a reason he's been keeping you in the dark. And the longer you wait, the more dangerous this becomes." Sarah's heart raced, her pulse pounding in her ears. Every part of her wanted to run, to get as far away from all of this as possible, but she knew deep down that she couldn't. Not now. The truth was out there, and she was tangled in a web too intricate and too dangerous to ignore. But confronting Jack? That felt like an impossible choice. She couldn't just walk up to him and ask about all of this, especially not with everything she now knew. But if she didn't, what would happen? Would the woman's warnings turn into reality? Would Jack come for her, just as he had threatened? The weight of the decision pressed down on her chest, and as she looked out the window at the darkening sky, a sudden thought struck her. What if the woman was lying? What if she was part of some scheme to manipulate Sarah into turning on Jack? What if she had been sent to fracture Sarah's trust in the one person she had left in this mess? Was that even possible? Just as Sarah opened her mouth to speak, her phone buzzed again, this time with a call from an unknown number. She hesitated, the unease in her gut growing. Should she answer it? But what if it was Jack, or worse, someone else entirely? With shaking hands, she picked up the phone, the screen lighting up with a familiar name. Her mother's number. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't spoken to her mother in months, hadn't even tried to reach out. The relationship had always been strained, filled with too many unanswered questions about the past. But now, just as everything was spiraling out of control, her mother was calling. Was this another twist in the web? Or was it a lifeline? Taking a deep breath, Sarah pressed the phone to her ear, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom?" she asked, uncertainty lacing her tone. For a moment, there was silence. Then her mother's voice came through, shaky but unmistakable. "Sarah, you have to stop. You have to stop digging into this. You don't know what you're up against. They're watching you." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. The realization that her mother knew something she wasn't telling her made the fear deepen, but the warning also made something else stir in her, a burning need for the truth. Her mother continued, her voice trembling. "You're not safe. I've tried to protect you from this, but it's too late. You need to leave town. Go far away. Please, for your own good. If you keep looking, they'll..." The call cut off abruptly. The silence that followed felt deafening. Was this her mother trying to protect her? Or was it just another layer of manipulation? The woman who had warned Sarah seemed to be waiting for her reaction, and Sarah realized that she had no idea who she could trust anymore. The options before her were impossible: flee and run, leaving the mystery unsolved, or confront Jack, forcing the truth out of him, no matter the cost. As the weight of the ultimatum settled over her, Sarah realized that whatever choice she made now, it would be impossible to turn back. She was already in too deep. But which path would lead her closer to the truth, and which one would lead her to certain danger? The answers were slipping through her fingers, and time was running out. Every second counted. The air in the room was thick with tension, the kind of pressure that suffocates you without warning. Sarah could feel the walls closing in, each passing second tightening the grip of fear around her chest. Her heart hammered in her chest, not just from the overwhelming weight of the decisions she had to make, but because something was coming, something she wasn't ready for, something she hadn't even begun to fully understand. Every warning, every cryptic message, every person she thought she could trust, everything now felt like it had been part of an intricate, carefully woven plan to pull her into something far larger than her own personal nightmare. The phone call from her mother lingered in her mind, the warning words ringing louder with every passing minute. "They're watching you." Her mother had never been one to show fear, at least not in front of Sarah. So why now? Why, after everything they'd been through, was her mother begging her to run? And why had the call been cut off so abruptly, as if someone had been listening, waiting for just the right moment to end it? A cold shiver ran down Sarah's spine as the dots began to connect in a way that made her blood run cold. As she sat in the dimly lit room, trying to piece together the fragments of truth that had been scattered in front of her, the doorbell rang. Sharp, insistent. It was the kind of sound that you don't hear often, the kind that sends your body into overdrive before you even think to open the door. Sarah froze. She didn't want to open it. She couldn't, not when everything in her screamed that something was wrong, so wrong that she might never get the chance to undo whatever mistake she was about to make. But the knock came again, louder this time, demanding her attention. Reluctantly, she stood, every step toward the door filled with dread. When she opened it, she was greeted by a figure that sent a jolt of disbelief through her entire body, Jack. But this wasn't the Jack she had known. The Jack who had always been her rock, the one who had looked out for her, the one who, despite everything, had always tried to protect her. No, this was someone entirely different. His eyes were cold, calculating, and filled with an intensity that made her blood run colder than the night air outside. And in his hand, he held something that made her heart drop into her stomach, a file, thick with documents, all of which she knew, instinctively, had the answers she had been searching for. "You need to stop," Jack said, his voice devoid of the warmth it used to hold. "This has gone far enough." Sarah could feel the walls closing in once more. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she was paralyzed, caught between the truth she was desperate to uncover and the betrayal that loomed over her like a shadow she couldn't escape. The man she had trusted most in the world, the one person who had been by her side for as long as she could remember, was now standing before her, holding the very thing that could shatter everything she thought she knew. Jack stepped inside, his movements calculated, deliberate, as if he had planned every moment of this encounter. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he said, his eyes narrowing as he assessed her. "You've seen too much. It's already too late." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The file in his hands wasn't just about her. It was about her mother, about the strange disappearances that had plagued their town for years, about the mysterious individuals who had come in and out of their lives, never fully explaining their purpose. And most horrifying of all, it was about a web of secrets so vast that it threatened to consume everyone in its path. Jack had known about it all along. "Jack," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you mixed up in?" But before Jack could respond, there was a sudden noise outside, loud, frantic footsteps, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone shouting her name. "Sarah?" The voice was distant, but unmistakable. It was her best friend, Emily. "Get out of there. He's not who you think he is." The words hit like a slap in the face. Emily? She was supposed to be her ally, the one person who could always be counted on to help her, no matter what. But now, as Emily's voice grew louder, Sarah realized that something was terribly wrong. Emily was terrified, no, more than that. She was running for her life. And she was warning Sarah, trying to save her from the very person who had been standing by her side for years. Jack's face twisted with a mixture of frustration and something darker, something more sinister. "You should have stayed out of this," he said, his voice growing colder with each word. "There are people you don't want to cross, Sarah. People who have been pulling strings long before you came into the picture. I try to keep you safe, but you've made your choice. Before Sarah could respond, Jack's phone buzzed loudly in his pocket. He pulled it out, his eyes scanning the screen for a moment before he looked back at her, his expression hardening. You've gone too far. They're coming for you now, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. The realization hit her like a freight train. This wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't just about uncovering a few hidden secrets or finding out who was behind a missing photo. This was about a conspiracy so vast, so deep, that it had entangled everyone she had ever known. Jack, her mother, Emily, everyone had been swept into it. The stakes were higher than she could have imagined, and now she was in too deep to back out. As if on cue, the door slammed open, and Sarah's heart dropped. A group of men, dressed in black suits, flooded the room, their eyes scanning the space with a cold, calculating precision. One of them stepped forward, a smile twisting at the corner of his lips. "We've been looking for you," he said, his voice smooth and threatening. "And it looks like you've found more than you bargained for." The truth, whatever it was slipping through her fingers faster than she could grasp it. There was no way out, no easy solution, and no one to trust. The walls were closing in, and Sarah had only one choice left: to fight back, to confront the darkness head-on and hope that somehow she would survive. But at what cost? And who would be left standing when the dust finally settled? The questions blurred together, and Sarah knew that the answers would cost her everything. The only thing left was survival. The night had never felt so suffocating. Sarah's heart raced in her chest, the walls of the room pressing in tighter with every passing second. The men in black suits stood in front of her, their cold eyes scanning her, as if they were waiting for her to make a move. Her mind was reeling, the weight of everything that had happened crashing down all at once. The conspiracy, the betrayal, the lies, it had all led her to this moment. She had been running from the truth for so long, but now there was no escaping it. The man in front, the one who had spoken first, stepped closer, his face expressionless, but his gaze calculating. "You're the last piece," he said, his voice low but steady. "We never meant for you to get involved, Sarah. But now that you are, we can't let you walk away. Not until you understand what you're dealing with." Her mind raced as she tried to piece everything together. These men weren't just random players in this twisted game. No, they were part of something much larger, something that had been in motion long before she ever found that photograph at the yard sale. The photo had been the spark that ignited everything, but what had it really meant? What was it hiding? Jack, standing off to the side, remained silent, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He hadn't moved, hadn't tried to stop the men. It was clear now he was part of it all. The betrayal stung deeper than anything else. She had trusted him, believed in him, and now all of that felt like it had been nothing more than a well-constructed lie. She couldn't even bring herself to look at him as the words formed in her throat, thick with fury and confusion. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and defiance. "What is this all about?" The man in the front stepped forward, his eyes locking with hers. "You're smarter than you look, Sarah. But some things are better left unknown. This isn't about you, it never was. It's about power, control, and a system that has been running for years. You were never meant to uncover what you did, but now that you have, we need to make sure it all ends here." Her breath caught in her throat as the pieces started falling into place, though the truth still felt like a twisted puzzle she couldn't quite solve. The conspiracy, whatever it was, wasn't just some shadowy figure pulling strings from behind the scenes. No, this was a far-reaching network, a web of influence and corruption that ran through every part of her life. Her mother, her friends, even Jack. None of them had been who she thought they were. Then, in a flash, everything changed. The door slammed open, and Emily rushed in, breathless, her face pale with fear. "Sarah, get out of here, now," she shouted, her voice strained, desperate. Sarah felt a rush of relief, but it was fleeting, replaced almost immediately by the realization that this wasn't going to be the rescue she had hoped for. Before Sarah could react, Emily collapsed to the ground with a sharp gasp, clutching at her chest. Blood was seeping from her shirt, a deep red stain spreading quickly. It was as if time itself had slowed, every movement, every sound, fading into the background as Sarah knelt beside her best friend, her hands trembling as she tried to stop the bleeding. "Emily," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No, please don't." The man who had spoken earlier stepped forward, his expression cold and unfeeling. "You shouldn't have come here, Emily," he said, his voice carrying a chilling finality. "But now, you've sealed your fate just like she has." Sarah's blood ran cold. They had shot Emily right in front of her. For a second, she could only stare, the horror of the moment freezing her in place. Then the anger surged through her, hot, searing, overwhelming. She wasn't going to let them get away with this, not without a fight. Not without exposing the truth, no matter what it cost her. But just as she was about to speak, Jack finally moved, his hand reaching into his coat pocket and pulling out a small, familiar envelope. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw it, one of the last pieces of the puzzle she hadn't been able to crack. He walked over to her, dropping it at her feet without a word. "You want the truth?" he said, his voice now cold and resigned. "This is it." Sarah bent down to pick up the envelope, her hands shaking as she tore it open. Inside, there was a single photograph, a different one this time, one she hadn't seen before. At first, it seemed like just another picture from her family's past. But as she stared at it, the full weight of what it meant hit her all at once. There, in the background of the photo, was her mother. But she wasn't alone. Standing next to her was a man, someone Sarah didn't recognize, with a look of authority and control in his eyes, someone who had been deeply involved in the conspiracy all along. It was a chilling revelation, one that turned everything she thought she knew upside down. The man who had been speaking to her smirked, clearly pleased with the chaos he had just unleashed. "Your mother wasn't just some innocent bystander, Sarah. She was a key player in all of this. She's been working with us for years." Everything clicked into place. The missing pieces, the strange behavior, the secretive conversations, all of it pointed to one undeniable truth. Her mother had been part of this dark world from the very beginning, and now, Sarah was in too deep to escape it. The lies, the betrayal, it was all a carefully crafted web, and she had walked straight into it. With a final, chilling glance at Emily, who was struggling to breathe, Sarah knew what she had to do. She wasn't going to be the victim. She wasn't going to let her best friend die for nothing. The fight wasn't over yet. The stakes had just been raised higher than ever before, and she was ready to face whatever came next, because now, the truth was hers to uncover, no matter what it cost her. But just as she stood up, ready to confront the darkness that had consumed her life, a voice echoed from the doorway, one she never expected to hear. Her mother. "I'm sorry, Sarah," she said softly, as if the weight of her words had been hanging in the air for a lifetime. "But you've been part of this all along." The room was still. The tension that had held it hostage for so long had finally dissipated, but its echoes lingered, lingering in the space between Sarah and her mother. Her hand trembled as she held the photograph, the one with the mysterious figure standing alongside her mother, the one that had unlocked the dark truth behind everything. For a moment, everything seemed to blur. The blood on Emily's shirt, the gunshots, the betrayals, it all swirled into a storm in Sarah's mind. She had just learned the unthinkable, that her mother had been a part of this web of corruption, manipulation, and deceit, and that she had been kept in the shadows of a past Sarah had no idea existed. It was the truth she never wanted to face, the truth she had feared all along, but it was here, undeniable and real. Her mother's voice broke the silence, but it wasn't the voice Sarah had known all her life. This was a voice hardened by secrets, by the burden of choices that could never be undone. "I'm sorry, Sarah," she said quietly, her gaze heavy with regret. "I never wanted you to be part of this, but the moment you found that photo, you were already in too deep. There's no way out for any of us now." Sarah didn't know what to say. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, but they didn't make sense. How could everything she thought she knew about her family, her own mother, be a lie? How could the woman who had raised her, who had always been there, suddenly become part of this shadowy underworld? But then it clicked. It was never just about the photo. The photo had been the key, but the truth was so much bigger. It wasn't just about her mother's involvement. It was about the system, the hidden world of power, control, and manipulation that had ensnared everyone, even the people Sarah loved most. Her emotions swirled, a mix of anger, betrayal, and a deep sense of loss. She had been forced to confront a truth that tore apart the very foundation of her life. And yet, amidst all the chaos, there was a part of her that couldn't let go of the need for closure. She needed to understand how it all fit together, why she had been targeted, why her mother had kept this from her for so long. But the answers, she realized, would never come in the way she had imagined. The truth was too vast, too tangled in lies and secrets to be fully understood. In the days that followed, the weight of what had happened settled over her like a fog that refused to lift. Emily had survived, though barely, and with Sarah's help, they had managed to expose part of the conspiracy, the names, the players, the shadowy organization that had been pulling the strings. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. The system was too entrenched, too powerful for one person to take down. But Sarah had learned something important. She had learned that truth, no matter how painful, had a way of creeping into the light, even in the darkest of places. And that, perhaps, was the first step toward redemption. As for her mother, she had disappeared. No one knew where she had gone, but it was clear she was no longer part of Sarah's life in the way she once had been. The woman Sarah had trusted, the woman who had shaped her, was no longer the person she thought she knew. And while part of her ached for that lost connection, another part of her knew that her mother's choices were her own, just as Sarah's choices were hers. She could no longer live in the shadow of someone else's mistakes. She had to move forward, for herself and for Emily, who was slowly healing, but whose wounds would never fully disappear. One night, as Sarah sat in the quiet of her apartment, staring out at the city lights that glittered in the distance, she felt a strange sense of peace. The kind of peace that only comes when you know the truth, no matter how painful it is. But even as she tried to settle into the quiet, her mind kept returning to that last conversation with her mother. The things she had said, the cryptic warnings, the hidden meaning behind her words. There was something there, something that had been left unsaid, something unfinished. And then it happened. A single text message appeared on her phone, the message she had feared but had known was coming. The game is far from over. No name, no clue, just those words. The final twist, the one that would make Sarah understand that even though the surface had been scratched, the heart of the conspiracy still lay hidden, waiting. The web wasn't done with her. It was never going to be. As the text buzzed on her phone, Sarah stood up, the weight of everything settling once more in her chest. She wasn't free, not yet. There was more to uncover, more to fight for. But now, she knew the truth, and that was something no one could ever take from her. The world had changed, and so had she. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on, because she had learned that the truth, however ugly or painful, was the only thing worth fighting for. The camera zoomed out from Sarah, standing at the window, looking out into the darkness of the night, knowing that the journey wasn't over. That's when the audience realized Sarah's story wasn't finished yet, and that, perhaps, was the most unsettling truth of all.